Today I'm going to convert my production Z-Wave setup onto OpenZWave beta. What could go wrong? All right, so the very first step we need to do here is we need to get a listing of all our node ID to name pairs. Because when you transfer from from Z-Wave to OpenZWave, you're not going to have any of the names that you currently have. So all your automations, all of your settings, switches, dials, dashboards are not going to work correctly because the names aren't going to be the same. So the way I do that is I go over to Developer Tools and States. Let me interrupt this video to bring you some important news. After I finished installing OpenZWave, I rebooted my Home Assistant instance, and bad things happened. It was touch and go for a while, but I was able to recover. If you don't want to be me and have the same problem, make sure that you're only running one instance of ZWave in your Home Assistant configuration. You can either turn off the one that you're playing with, OpenZWave, and revert back to the original, or delete the original ZWave. But only run one at the same time, or many, many bad things will happen. Okay, back to the video. Have fun. And I filter for node ID. And everything that has a node ID, a Z-Wave node ID, will show up on this list. And I go through and I grab, and this takes a little bit of finesse. I try to grab the first line here, and sometimes it works better if you go to the bottom. But if you hold down the Shift key and highlight all of this, which didn't work, so we'll put it here. We'll just go up like this, all the way to the top. Oh, maybe it did. All right, so then I'll do a Control-C on the keyboard, and I will put this in I will paste this all into Excel. You can put this in any of your whatever editor you want to use. I find it easier in Excel because then I can filter the columns and see what I'm looking at here. And once you have all of this in your Excel, then you can go back and start doing the switch. You'll save this for later on because you can see here that all these node IDs go with a specific device. So for example, all these switches that I have named in my automations or in my dashboards all have a node ID value with a name. These are the names that we're going to have to use in order for us not to have to rebuild all of our automations. The next thing we need to do is we need to go to our supervisor, our add-on store, and we need to search for Z-Wave. And we're going to install OpenZWave. But we're not going to turn it on yet. All right, so it's installed. You do eventually want it to start on boot. You probably want to do Watchdog, especially since this is your Z-Wave network. For me, I want to make sure it's always running. And in the configuration, we need to put in our network key, or I do. I have some door locks and a garage door opener that use a secure connection to Z-Wave, and they use the network key. And so nothing will work unless I have a network key set up. So let's go get the network key. And in the documentation, it talks about that here. Also, you need to set your device. So you need to determine what your current device is being used. And you need to also find your network key. So if we go to the hardware page, we'll be able to see all of our devices. So we're going to do this supervisor system host system hardware page. So we'll go to supervisor system host system hardware. And if you're running Z-Wave already and you're using something like a Z-Wave, Aeon Z-Wave stick or something like that, you probably know what your device is. I know that my device is this dev TTY ACM0. And this comes from messing with it for a while. You'll have to do your own research on figuring out what your device is if you don't know what it is. It's typically one of these ACM zeros or ACM something or others. We'll go back over to Supervisor and we will find OpenZWave configuration and we will put in the device. And then the network key part is a whole different story. So you have to find your network key. You can build your own network key using the instructions in the documentation if you don't have one. If you already have one and you have devices set up, in order to prevent having to flash or factory reset those devices, it's highly recommended that you use the network key that you already have set up. So I'm going to go find my network key and I'm going to put it in here. Now to find my network key, I'm going to have to go onto my Home Assistant instance and get that network key because I don't know of any other place I can find it without looking at it in the actual XML file. So I already did some research on this earlier, and my configuration for where my network key and other options for Z-Wave are currently set is in this user share hasio home assistant options.xml. I'm running Home Assistant on a Docker container. So this is the host system that I'm looking at, not the actual Home Assistant instance in Docker or the Home Assistant Docker container. So this is again on the host system that I'm finding this. I will go into that file and I will find my network key and put that in my configuration. All right, now that you've pasted both your network key and your device configuration in the configuration settings, go ahead and save it. And now the next step is not to start it. All right, we need to go back over to our OpenZWave under Configuration Integrations. Our original Z-Wave, which is this right here. Click on Configure, and we're going to stop the network. Sip of coffee. All right, so the network is now stopped. And now we can go back over to a newly discovered OpenZWave beta and configure that. So we'll click on that. It wants to know if we want to confirm the setup, and we do, so the answer is submit. And now it's created the configuration for OpenZWave. Now that that is done, we can go back over to our plugin or our add-on, and we can start it up. And we'll check the log and see what we get going here. Crossing fingers. All right, so now we see that we have some stuff going on here. I don't know what that error was, but we're going to ignore it for now. So it is receiving data. Yes, so I'm now getting information from the different nodes. So that tells me that I'm getting information from, yep, everything's coming together. One thing I failed to mention, and I'm not going to go re-record the video for this, but I will tell you, you definitely need to make sure that you have a mosquito broker installed. So if you don't have one installed, this should be done before any of the rest of what I just said. So make sure you do it first. You go to search for mosquito in the add-on store and make sure that is installed and up and going. Make sure that it's running before you try to do the rest of this. I'm using MQTT for other things, so I already had it installed and running, and I forgot to mention that, so make sure that's done. All right, so now we have stuff running in our OpenZWave. We see data coming in to our integration. And I'm going to go back again and just look at that one more time. And you should find your OpenZWave beta on here. Right, here it is right here. I have 26 devices, 114 entities. And if I click on configure, you can actually add and remove nodes through this particular panel, through this integration. But I want to also look at what devices I've found here. So I have 26 devices, and like we talked about before, I have a bunch of different items here that have generic names that are provided by the OpenZWave consortium, or whoever makes these things up, manufacturers. The stuff in the OpenZWave file says this is a 12722 on-off relay switch made by GE, Jasco Products, model, you know, yada yada stuff here. And its integration, of course, is OpenZWave beta. You also notice that I don't have any battery devices over here yet. The battery devices actually have to wake up and talk to OpenZWave before they're going to show up. Now, if I take one of these devices here, let's take one of these switches, and I click on it, I can see that this is node ID 27. It has an entity of 12270 outdoor smart switch. That doesn't mean anything to my automations. It doesn't mean anything to anything else that I've been running here. So in order to fix that, I need to go in and I need to reference node ID 27 to the list of nodes in my spreadsheet. So I'm going to look at my spreadsheet from earlier, and I'm going to find node ID 27. And it's going to tell me what that particular switch is doing. And so here's node ID 27. So that is my living room lamp. So what I need to do is, in order for all of my automations and everything else to work, I need to rename that what they show in OpenZWave to that particular node. So a couple different ways. One of the best ways to do that is to come over here, click on that right there. Number one, we're going to give it a name, living room lamp. And this is one of those outdoor switches. I'm just using it as a switch to turn on my lamp in the living room. That's why it's called outdoor smart switch. It's really in the house. So do I want to rename the entity IDs of your entities? It doesn't change any configuration like automation script scenes. I will have to update all those myself. So I could say okay to that. And now I see living room lamp switch. Now if I refresh my devices list after renaming that, you will see that I have living room lamp listed in here. And I can also click this right here, and it's called switch living room lamp switch. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about OpenZWave is that when you tell it to rename it using the gear icon up here, the results are going to be maybe not what you want. So in order for me to use this switch living room lamp switch, or living room lamp in my automations the way they were before, I actually have to remove the tail end of this. Now what's probably going to happen is, because I have switch.livingRoomLamp in regular ZWave, it's going to complain about that. Let's just see. Entity is already registered. So that's a problem with that. So we have a couple of different options here. Now, for me, moving from ZWave to OpenZWave with 30 whatever it was devices, 38 devices I think I have, I'm okay with renaming all of those if I have to in my automations. The other option we're going to try is to remove the original, or rename the original, and try to rename this one to that, to the original. So if I search for living room lamp, I have living room lamp ZWave, living room lamp, or switch living room lamp, and then I have switch living room lamp switch. This is the one that I have now, this is the one I want to use. So I'm not sure that I can do anything with this, but we're going to try to remove switch living room lamp. Be careful here, because this may be the point of no return whenever you do this. So I'm going to click on remove selected. All right. So I'm going to say yes, but it's telling me basically it can't rename it. So that's option, I don't know what option we're on now. C, A, B, C, something. So one of the things that you can do right now today in the current state that I've just put my system in is switch between ZWave and OpenZWave. If I start removing a whole bunch of stuff from my ZWave configuration, my ZWave integration, I won't be able to switch back if something were to go wrong. So for me, I'm going to take a different route. I'm going to go back to this living room lamp switch, and I'm going to, instead of naming it switch.livingroom.lamp switch, I'm going to go with a different name. I'm going to say switch.livingroom.lamp OZW, and I'm going to update that. So that tells me in my personal naming convention that I am using the OpenZWave on this switch. The thing about it is I'm going to have to go through every single one of these and do that. Rename it to something that makes sense to me, and also put the OZW on the end of it. Now, if I were to go to my dashboards or my automations, I would also need to change it to match the new entity ID. And that could get messy, right? It could get messy. Could be a lot of work, but you are basically taking the heart of your system and replacing it. And there are some drawbacks and some extra work to do that. I'm saying all of this today under the assumption that at some point, as this becomes more mature under the Home Assistant umbrella, that there will be an integration, or not integration, there will be a migration tool of some sort that will move these things over. So let's take another example. Let's go back to this next one. So you notice already that it's put it down here, so it should say living room lamp in this list somewhere. And it looks like I'm doing all of my stuff here. So let's do living room lamp. Yeah, so here's the living room lamp I just created. So I'm going to pick another one of those JASCO switches. We'll do on-off relay switch, a different one. And this is node ID 2. I guess it's the second thing I actually installed in this network. So for that, let's go find out what node ID 2 is. All right, so node ID 2 is the front porch light switch. That's an in-the-wall GE switch. So this one is called front porch lights. So again, I'll come over here and I'll name it front porch lights. And you can set an area. I'm not doing that right now, but you could. And I didn't do it when I clicked off. So front porch lights. And it's going to ask me to rename all of this. Okay. Now, if we click on this, again, I think we're going to see front porch light switch. Now, it actually didn't name this part. It didn't rename the actual entity ID other than to put, I think, the word switch at the end. Yep. So if we look at our spreadsheet, that's friendly name front porch lights. The actual name of the entity is switch.frontporchlights. So we're going to need to actually do a manual rename of this one. So we'll say switch front porch lights. And again, watch, if I try to update it, entity is already registered. So let's do OZW for OpenZWave. And now this particular device has been renamed. So let's go back over to our integrations page because I want to refresh this entity ID list. And we now have 27 devices on here. And I'm looking for some battery stuff. So now we have some battery stuff that has woken up and started reporting. So I have I actually don't know what these things. Okay, so we have a couple of locks. So you can see here, which is really good, that the lock, my two outdoor deadbolt locks, my front and back door locks, are now working. That means that the network key worked correctly. So if I click on one of these, again, we'll look at node ID 22, and I'll find, I know what it is, but I want to see how I named it. So here's node ID 22, and there are a bunch of these. If I were to filter this column C, I believe it is. Let me filter column C. So now you can see that there are a number of different values that you pulled from the original Z-Wave. And so I'm looking for this one. I want to know what I actually called it. So friendly name, front door lock, and then entity ID lock.front_door_lock. So I'm going to change the friendly ID to front door lock like I did everything else. Front door lock. Update that. Yep. And now it's changed these two things. If I look at the battery level on that spreadsheet, it's keeping the original quick set touchpad electron, the whole thing, right? It's keeping that original thing. So I'm going to do just the lock part for now, which is this. And you can see lock, smart code, blah, blah, blah. If I change it to front door lock, I'm going to try this one without putting OZW in to see what it does. Yeah, the same thing. So I do use that. I knew better, and update it. So now if you look at the battery level, see how it says smart code 10 front door lock battery level. In the spreadsheet, it says the same thing. And does it do anything at the end? No. Smart code 10 front door lock battery level. See, it's actually given it a little bit of a different name, which is why there isn't a conflict on that name. So I could rename it to front door lock battery level now, and I might just go ahead and do that. If I'm changing things right now, some of these things I never fixed, like renaming that correctly in the beginning, I'm going to fix it now. So now I have front door lock battery level. And you can go on and on and on and on with all of this. Originally we had 38, I think, devices. And again, I'm going to refresh the integrations list. There's 27 devices. There are some devices that are not showing up here. Either one, because they aren't supported in OpenZWave yet, or two, because they're sleeping and haven't woken up. I'm looking for things like my multi-sensor. Here's two of them. I know I have 4 of those. So 2 of them are not reporting yet for some reason. It's not going to happen immediately. From what I understand, you're going to have some time for your network to go through and all the things to wake up. You need to flip a light switch here or there and have it talk back to the system and wake up. So there's a lot of waking up and a lot of renaming things. I have tested this previously, so I know that what I'm doing here works on some of the switches. The process now is to go through and to rename all of this stuff to match your automations. Now, one of the other things I'll show you here is under Node Red, I'll show you an example of one of the things that I've changed. I changed the living room lamp, and under light actions, this is where the automation is. So um, at yeah, at sunset or a little bit before sunset, I turn on some of my inside lights because it starts to get dark in the house. Even though the sun's still out, the shadows and the where the sun is and the house facing and the windows, it starts to get dark. Anyway, I turn these things on, and living room lamp is one of those. So my entity now is set to switch living room lamp. If I'm running on Z-Wave, the regular Z-Wave, this isn't going to work because it's no longer using Z-Wave. Z-Wave network is turned off. If I want the living room lamp to actually function at sunset tonight or whenever, I'm going to have to change this to the OZW entity because this is the OZW entity that is now running um, on the new OpenZWave beta network. I'll click on done there. The same thing applies if you're doing this in automations on through the UI and Home Assistant. It applies if you're doing scenes or anything else. You're basically changing your entity IDs for your devices by renaming them. And then you could come over here to where my front porch lights are. But same thing applies. Front porch lights is not going to work because that's on the original Z-Wave network, which is turned off. I can turn on, or I can choose the OZW and make that work. So it's tedium to go through and change it. I have not tried to completely wipe out my Z-Wave network, which means I would uninstall the original integration and then put this in place, and it may let me just keep all of the names that I already have for everything. If you do that and it works, you can comment below and let me know. But I'm not in the position to completely obliterate my network in the house. I have other people living here that are not as technologically friendly as I am. And so if I destroy their workflows, they're going to be upset with me. So I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to individually move things one at a time and make sure everything works as it goes along. If I end up with a problem with some of the devices that are currently not showing up for some reason, then I can go back and switch easily because I haven't destroyed the original network. So that is a quick rundown of getting from regular Z-Wave that's already built into Home Assistant to the OpenZWave beta, and a little bit of playing around with that. If you have any questions, let me know. Put those in the comments. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you are not a subscriber, please, please, please hit that little icon in the bottom right of the screen and subscribe. Subscribers help the algorithm put the content to the top. Like buttons help the algorithm put the content to the top. And I would love to have more subscribers, and I would love to have my video show up higher in the list of videos. So like and subscribe. If you feel like you want to do a little donation to help the cause, Patreon and Ko-fi are two options for you as well. I'll put those in the link below. And let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you on the next video.